is not good. It's too dark. Anyway, what to do? Okay. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Today's class is entitled Getting really real about your real stuff. It's a continuation of the song Gopinatha. And in the service I have, often I have to help devotees with problems. So I'm very aware of this verse of the Bhagavatam, which says, Kalar doshandi devajan, Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults. Sometimes I think I'm swimming in that ocean. Not because of my own faults, although I could swim in that ocean, but of the many faults that devotees have that I have to deal with. And yesterday I was thinking that this verse, Kalar doshandi devajan, Ekohi asti mahagunan. We're swimming in an ocean of faults. It's Kali Yuga. I mean, everywhere you look, there's a problem, isn't it? You solve one problem, there's three more problems. Like it's just, the more you find out about something, the more you realize how bad it is, isn't it? You know, if you look into something, child abuse, if you look into prostitution, if you look into just different problems, you learn that they're widespread, that they're serious. It doesn't seem to be like a solution that can really solve it once and for all. So everything's like, look into ecology. Some people are saying there in 50 years there won't even be enough water. We won't even grow enough food. The population will be too big. I mean, everywhere you look, it's like the sky is falling. It's a world, the world is full of faults. And so then you look at yourself and you see, oh, I have so many faults. Well, it's Kali Yuga, that's normal. You know, if you didn't have a lot of faults, you're kind of like, you ended up in the wrong age or something. You should be in Satya Yuga. And you accidentally fell into Kali Yuga. So, you know, nobody wants faults. And like, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, it's the wrong age. You know, if you don't want any faults, stick around another 400 and whatever's left, 400 and what's left, 27,000 years. Then Sat Yuga starts over. Then there'll be a lot of problems the next 425,000 years, but then you get Sat Yuga, not so many problems. So if we run into problems, that's just kind of normal. And if you solve one problem, obviously, at some point, there's going to be another problem. Have you ever had a time where everything was just going like really well? And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, something came crashing down on your head? That's normal. So when we're reading about Bhaktivinoda Thakur and his taking this humble position in opening up to Krishna about all his inadequacies. And then we start looking at our own inadequacies and we think, wow, I'm a mess. But that's normal. It's Kali Yuga. You cannot, I don't think anybody cannot be a mess. In Kali Yuga, it's just a contradiction. That's just how it is. So then this verse says, Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults, but asti mahagunan, there is one good quality, kirtanadeva krishnasya. If you do kirtan of Krishna, mukta sangha param bhajet, you become liberated, go back to Godhead. So the point of that verse is to say that even though we're swimming in an ocean of faults, even though we are the personification of an ocean of faults, it's not going to stop us from going back to Godhead, because the holy name will deliver us in spite of those faults. Or, we can, this may sound strange, but in spite of those faults, we can go back to Godhead even with him. You say, well, I thought I was supposed to be pure. Well, pure means I love Krishna, but I could still love Krishna and be swimming in an ocean of faults. It's possible because it's Kali Yuga. There's just everything, nothing is perfect. So I may be a perfect pure devotee, but I'm still in this environment of imperfection. One time The devotees were telling Prabhupada that this is contaminated, that's contaminated. And Prabhupada said, it's Kali Yuga, everything's contaminated. Like this food's contaminated. He said, yeah, everything's contaminated. It's Kali Yuga. You're not going to get it pure. So Prabhupada accepted that. And so that was kind of the mode of operandus of Prabhupada is that we're not trying to create perfection on the material level because you won't get it. We're trying to create perfection on the spiritual level in spite of the imperfection on the material level. So one of the things you get from this prayer is Bhaktivinoda Thakura is saying, I'm impure, I'm imperfect, so I'm praying to you to get your mercy that I can be Krishna conscious in spite of those imperfections. So that's kind of the mood of Mahaprabhu. In spite of the imperfections, you still get it. That's good news, right? For all of us who are swimming in the ocean of faults. You still get perfection despite those faults. Of course, I'm not talking about rationalizing sinful activities and compromising and so forth. But we're just saying that as imperfect beings, sometimes we're trying, but trying still is not quite good enough. But fortunately, that's not an impediment to becoming Krishna conscious. So that's the idea, that's the mood. So, so when you see your faults, when you get really real about your real stuff and you start to become discouraged, you can actually spin it around to become encouraged and think, well, despite all of my faults, I can still get Mahaprabhu's mercy. It's available, he's giving it, and I can get it. So then you can go from discouragement to encouragement. That is what mercy means, is mercy doesn't look at your fault, it looks at your willingness, it looks at whatever you're doing right. So there was one author who said that we look at our weaknesses and we see that God still accepts us and he purifies us in spite of our weaknesses. I think he was a Catholic. He said that glorifies God. So just the fact that I am fallen, but he accepts me, then in my fallenness, he's glorified. Isn't that nice? So we don't have to be discouraged by our fallen nature because he is still accepting us, and that creates glory to the fact that we're not glorious. Does that make sense? There is glory to the fact we're not glorious because we're being accepted despite any lackings we have. We're being accepted and we can be purified. So that's what makes it glorious. So in that sense, the faults that we have end up, in a sense, glorifying Krishna, that he would accept such fallen people and that he could purify such fallen people. I really like that. I think it's a beautiful way to position our position. Now, the other thing is, obviously, nobody likes to have faults and nobody's happy about it. But at the same time, you can't become something you're not before you become it. You understand that? Should I say that in English or what? You can't become what you're not before you become it, which is a hard thing to accept for a lot of people because they want to become what they're not before they're qualified to become it. And so you can't go against nature. It's like, well, I planted the seed yesterday, I want the tree tomorrow. And have some temper tantrum because the tree didn't grow to full length in one day. So sometimes we're like that. We want to be a certain way, and we're not, and we become frustrated with the fact that we're not. And it's just like planting a seed and getting frustrated that the plant or tree didn't grow overnight. So that's just a reality we have to accept. And we're all conditioned souls, and we've come to this world with certain conditioning. And there is something we can do about it, obviously, but what we're doing about it is not going to change things immediately. Yeah, water the plant, make sure it has good fertilizer, make sure it's getting enough sunlight, make sure it's not freezing. Yeah, you do all those things, but it's going to take time. So if while the plant is growing, you went into this state of frustration or anger or depression, that would be strange, wouldn't it? Why are you so depressed? My tree's not growing fast enough. And everyone's like, well, it takes 10 years to grow this tree. Yeah, but that's not fair. Everybody would think like, Prabhu, are you okay? I mean, it takes 10 years to grow this tree. Yeah, I know, but it's not fair. I want it tomorrow. So sometimes we're like that. And so one of the most important things that we can do to be Krishna conscious is just to accept things as they are now. It's not just about accepting us as we are. It's about accepting everything as it is. I think the world is such a bad and depressing place. And if it's sometimes, like when we lived in Mayapur, we didn't even know what was going on in the world. And we were happily in ignorance. It's like the world could have blown up and probably take us 2 weeks before we found out. Because we're just, you're not really interested in it. You're not connected to it. You don't really need to know who's the president of this country or this political campaign that's going on or this demonstration. It doesn't have any really real relevance to you. So just kind of didn't really bother us. I have to be a little bit like that with what's going on in the world, what's going on in our life. It's not ultimately really relevant. But if we focus on it too much, it is kind of depressing, disgusting. And so, but the fact is, it's just how it is. And we can do our best to become better, to make the world better, make it more Krishna conscious. But right now, this is how it is. So that's part of the spiritual practice, is just, okay, we want to make it better, but right now it's like this. And we have to acknowledge that and not go crazy because it's like that. But we're trying to do our best to be better. So it's the same thing with ourselves. This is just how I am. I don't want to go crazy about it. I want to be better. I try to be better. That's all I can do. So in the prayers of Gopinath, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is describing his position, but you can see that he's not happy about it. At the same time, you can see he feels like, I don't know what else to do to get out of it because this is how it is. So I have to acknowledge this is how it is. I can't pretend it's not like this. I don't like it, but I have to accept it. And by accepting it, then what does he do? He prays to Krishna because I don't know how to get out of this. I'm doing everything I can. I'm watering. It's in the sun. I'm putting on fertilizer, but it's a little plant. Krishna, can you make it grow overnight? Actually, Krishna could, right? Krishna could plant a pearl in the ground and grow pearl bushes, which he did. He could put a pencil on the ground and grow a mango tree. He could do anything. So that's kind of the mood. Well, when all else fails, ask Krishna to help you when you've tried everything else. Something like that, right? So that's the mood. Okay, so I thought also maybe it might be useful to speak a little bit about Bhaktivinoda Thakur, just because we didn't, and we're reading his song, and maybe all of you are not so familiar with Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but he was considered the seventh Goswami by some. I'm not sure who called him that. Someone gave him that title, the seventh Goswami, like the intimate associate of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Prabhupada said he was the pioneer of Krishna consciousness in the West. It was in his mind to spread Krishna consciousness in the West. He put that seed in the mind of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta put that seed in the minds of his disciples. So he was considered the pioneer of the West. He had a vision. The devotees from around the world would come together and do kirtan in Mayapur. He had a vision of Krishna consciousness being spread around the world. He was trying to do that, which is why he prayed for a son to help him, and which is why he pushed his son to get Krishna consciousness out of India. He wrote, I don't know the exact number, but I think it's at least 100 books. And most of this writing was done while he was a grihasta with a full-time job, to just give you an idea of the empowerment that he had. And, sleep a few hours and stay up all night and write and chant and work all day. And then he established the Namhanta program. He preached widely, and he was one of the things that he contributed to was explaining the philosophy, extensively explaining the philosophy of Krishna consciousness in a very deep way, but a way that it was easily understandable. And specifically, in regards to japa and chanting, he outlined how to perfect one's chanting in very practical ways, maybe more practical than most of the previous acharyas. And a lot of the japa workshops that are given rely heavily on his book Harinam Chintamani or Bhajan Rahasya or other books. Jaiva Dharma, it's got two chapters on the holy name. So in that sense, I find his writing unique in the sense of its practicality. And very, very real. He talked about very real things, realities that bhaktas face on all levels of their life and how to deal with it. So, Nadia, you want to put up the next verse? Okay, so we are reading from the second. There's 3 sections of Gopinatha. This is the second section. There are 8 verses in each section. This is the 8th verse of the second section. Gopinath tumito pandita bharo. Boro. Mudhera mangala tumi anveshive. E dhashe na bhave poro. The A becomes O. That's why sometimes they chant Kisno, Adamo. If you go to Mayapur, you may hear that. Hari Ramo. Everything becomes O in Bengali. And Prabhupada said, who is this Ramo? I've never heard of him. How come you're chanting to Ramo? Who's that? Hari Rama, Hari Krishna, Hari Ramo. To me, you, To, are certainly Pandita Bharo, the wisest person. Mudera Mangala, auspiciousness for this fool. Mudha means fool. I was looking at these words and I was thinking, what does that mean? Mudera, like an auspicious fool. And the fools are not auspicious. Auspiciousness for this fool. Mudera, for Mangala, auspiciousness. To me, Anveshive, if you will look for a way, Edasi, this servant, Nabhavo, please do not consider Pada an outsider. Okay, translate, you can kind of understand the translation. Oh, Gopinath, you are indeed the wisest person. Please look for a way to bring about auspiciousness for this fool. And please do not consider this servant as an outsider. So I think one thing that should be obvious to all of us by reading this is the desperateness with which Bhaktivinoda Thakur is praying like I have to have this. And as we know, Prabhupada said, chanting is like a child crying for its mother. And have you ever seen a child like that has to have something? Like, I'm sure you have. You ever go shopping and the child's like, I have to have that, and does a tantrum? And at some point the parents, they can't stop the child. They don't have the skills to calm the child down, or they didn't raise the child with enough discipline, so they just give the lollipop and the child stops. Have you seen that before? It's bad parenting skills. It's because they don't know how to like talk to the kid and just go, okay, if you ask nicely, then maybe I'll consider it. The kid's like 3, can't understand anything. I remember with my daughter, I used to give her like the wisdom of the sages when she was 3. Just like, at least maybe it went in, but at that moment it didn't look like it. And it wasn't until she was like 5 or 6 that I remember she could start actually understanding and acting upon, to some degree, what I was saying. But anyway, that's another topic for another day. So we see Bhaktivinoda Thakur is desperate. And this is so important. And Krishna likes to see the desperateness. And you might think, wow, that sounds like he's quite a person. He wants to see us all desperately suffering. No, he doesn't want to see us suffering, but he likes to create situations where we desperately want to be Krishna conscious, to have his mercy to advance and so forth. So that's the mood of this prayer. And I think we can agree that is the mood of all prayers, right? That should be the mood of all prayer, right? Because if there's not a desperateness, then how does Krishna know? How do you communicate to Krishna that this is what you want? Now you might say, but what do I do if I'm not desperate? Like, I don't care that much whether or not I get the mercy. Then your prayer has to be a little different. Your prayer has to be, Krishna, please help me become desperate, because I'm not. So you have to pray according to where you're at. And if you are not feeling desperate for the mercy, that becomes your prayer, that I know I'm not desperate and I should be. Please help me become desperate. Please enlighten me why I should become desperate. Please give me the association I need, or give me whatever I need to become desperate. And that's really the qualification. Lolyam. And it's really the qualification for any success, even outside the spiritual world. If you ever hear stories or learn strategies for success, you'll always find that this is why people became successful. They were relentless about achieving success. Have you ever been relentless about something? Like, I just have to do this, and all the obstacles start falling in your way. And you're like, no, I'm just going to do it. And you just pursue no matter what, no matter how difficult it is. You just run into one problem after another, and you want to go somewhere, and you buy your ticket, and the credit card didn't go through, and the price goes up double the next day when you try to buy it, and then the only seat left is next to the toilet in the back of the airplane. And you get it, and then you find out that you need a visa to go to this country, and they don't let Lithuanians get visas for that country. And so then, what am I going to do? But if I fly into another country, then once I'm in the other country, then I can get in because they won't check my in. So you're just going, and then you look at your passport. Oh my God, my passport expired. And then you're like, how do I get a new passport? And you go, well, if I pay extra money, I can get the passport, but I can only get it the day I'm leaving my flight. And one thing after another. I'm just telling you a story that would just happen to my daughter. Not exactly, but basically, this is what happened. And she's right now getting her passport, and her plane leaves today. So it's a real story, but I didn't want to mention her because she's like, why you tell everybody about me? So none of the details are exactly, but she's, just to give you an idea, she's getting her passport at this very moment and her flight leaves tonight. So I was witness to her determination, and I kept saying, oh, this is a lot of trouble. Maybe you shouldn't go. No, I'm going. And the prices kept going up. And then, got to get your COVID test and blah, blah, blah. So, but I was just watching, like, well, she wants to go. And like every obstacle that fell in front of her, it's like, we're going to work our way around it. And I'm sure you've been in a situation like that, right? You really want to go. And so one of the things we learn from this is that often, I wouldn't say all the time, but I would say as a general rule, have you ever just kind of given up on something? Just like, I guess it's too hard. It's probably because it wasn't that important. And you let the difficulty, just like it's not that important. I'm going to spend that much money to get the ticket. Then I got to get my passport, and my passport expired. And I got to fly here and do this. That's not worth it. You ever said that? It's just not worth it, right? It's too much trouble. I'm sure you've said that, right? That's because it's a fact. It's not worth it. It's not worth it to you. So you just don't sweat it because it's not worth it, right? But have you ever been in the same situation where it's like, doesn't matter what obstacle is thrown at you, you're like, okay, how are we going to get around it? Right? Like, you want to go to Vrindavan or Mayapur and all your friends are going, and, and this Maharaj is going to be there in this festival, and then they're going to install this, and right, and then this, moving the deities to this place, and you're like, I can't miss this for the world, and there's like 108 reasons why you have obstacles to jump over, and you jump over every one. So it's good to acknowledge that, because when you come to this point where you start saying it's too much trouble or it's not worth it, etc., then so like, okay, check in with your desire, because if that's how you feel, then Krishna's like, okay, okay, that's how you feel. Okay, I'll reciprocate. I can reciprocate with that. You have no energy for service. I can reciprocate with that. I can reduce it even more. So you have to be careful, because he knows how to reciprocate, right? Anyway, I think it's clear that for anything, be it material or spiritual, that mood has to be there. And that's the success. Mm-hmm. So Nadi says, how can we understand and see the difference between obstacles we have to overcome and Krishna's desire to stop us? The best way, what Nadi is saying is, well, maybe it's just an indication we're not supposed to do it. And that's one way to take it. The other way to take it is maybe it's an indication that I am supposed to do it and Maya's getting in the way and she doesn't want me to do it. Have you ever done Sankirtan, Nadia? And then you're on the road and it's like, you have to get to some spot at a certain time. And there's a big like detour and you're going to get late and you're going to miss the event, or it's starting to rain. I don't know if you ever did events or anything with Vanish. So sometimes we would be doing an event and then there would be like a traffic jam or it started to rain and we think, oh no. And I would always tell everybody, I said, this means this is going to be huge for Sankirtan, and Maya's trying to stop us. I always felt that way. It's like, this is a sign we're going to do huge. But the other devotees are like, why are we even bothering? It's so much trouble, it's so far. And why, So I'm not discounting that sometimes you could think that way and it would be the right decision. Like, yeah, we're just going to run into rain. It's going to rain for 5 days. We're going to drive 500 miles. And when we get there, we can't do any Sankirtan and waste all that time and money. Yeah, that's possible. But I saw so many times the opposite that I just that's my spontaneous reaction was, oh, this is going to be big. So, but it's true because we have the principle over endeavor is a cause of fall down. I could endeavor to the point of compromising my sadhana. or compromising my personal principles in order to achieve something, or as Nadia is saying, there's an obstacle in the way, and the energy it will take to overcome this obstacle may be not worth it. So how do we know? I would say we should first default to the fighting spirit, and that we have to overcome this, and just think it's just something to overcome on the way to success. When Prabhupada was trying to get the property in Juhu, and then they found out that this man was trying to cheat us of the deposit we gave of $50,000, which was 1975. So that's probably equivalent to a couple $100,000 now at this point. Maybe 250, maybe more. Maybe a lot more. Yeah. In 1970 or 69, my father sold our house for $80,000. Now it's worth at least $1 million. So it went up 10 times since 1970. So let's say it went up 5 times, at least 5 or 6 times since whenever Prabhupada did, maybe it was 74. My father should have never sold that house. You know, that house that I grew up in, it is a 5-minute drive from the LA temple. 5 minutes, yeah. I calculated in my head 5 minutes, especially at 4:30 in the morning, probably 4 minutes or 3.5. Would have been a nice house to have. And if I didn't live there, probably could live off the rent of that house. Just renting it out. The rents are so expensive in Los Angeles. You could probably live somewhere else. Yeah, you probably, off the rent, you could probably build a mansion in Siberia. So anyway, that's just one of the things I lament about, of the bad decisions my father made. But anyway, everything happens karmically. So my default is first go to, this is an obstacle we need to overcome. But then if you start looking at it and thinking, the effort I have to put in to overcome this and the result I will get, it seems disproportionate. It seems like it's not worth. Then talk to some senior devotees and ask them, what do you think? Do you have that doubt, right? And you may find out that you were actually thinking correctly, or you may find out that you were just giving in to something unnecessarily, and then they would help you give that perspective. So it's a good question, because it's not always that we're meant to fight. But I wanted to tell this story about Juhu. You know what Prabhupada said? Because they weren't getting the permit to build the temple. And Prabhupada wanted that property so much. He said, well, if we don't get the permit, we'll just use it for a parking lot for all our traveling Sankirtan buses. I'm not exactly sure why he said that, but it was kind of like, I'm not giving up this fight. And I don't know if you know this, Nadia, but you probably know some of the story that the man who was cheating us, he died, I think, of a heart attack. And his wife came and apologized because she knew what he was doing. And so finally everything cleared up and we got the permits and so on. At the end of it, Prabhupada said, that was a good fight. So there is that, there is that spirit, that a lot of us have, is like, it's just a fighting spirit. We won't give in no matter what. So not that it's always the best, but that was Prabhupada's mood. But now, one time they wanted to get a temple, and it was very expensive. And they asked Prabhupada, and he said, don't get it because it's so expensive, and to pay it off, you'll just buy anxiety. Like, it'll just be like, you'll only be thinking about money. So he told him not to get it. And this isn't going to answer your question. I think you know how this story ended, Nadia. It just doesn't answer the question at all. Or maybe it does in a sense. So then Prabhupada later visited that city and he said, so did you get the temple? And the devotee said, no, Prabhupada, we don't want to buy anxiety. He was just repeating what Prabhupada said. And Prabhupada said, there must be anxiety, otherwise we'll just sleep and eat. So he So sometimes, Prabhupada himself could even switch, what he saw as an obstacle and didn't. So, a lot will depend on the individual, because maybe for you it's an obstacle, but maybe for Alina, it's not. It's like, no, I can do this, or I don't care, or we have to get this, And so maybe for you, it's like, well, if I do this, I'll have a nervous breakdown. Yeah, then obviously, if you're going to have a nervous breakdown, probably better don't do it. But someone else may do it. I go, okay, let's do it. I want to do it. So, it's not always just objectively right or wrong. It can be subjectively also. So what can inspire Alina may not inspire you, Nadia. What inspires you may not inspire her. So then it becomes an obstacle for her or for you, depending on the situation. So you have to look at it both ways. So, that means in some cases you actually should do it, but you're not the right person to do it, because if you do it, you'll burn out and crash. So, so we should hire Alina to do it. Then she won't burn out and crash. So like sometimes people thrive. I know this, like people have this mood. If there's lots of problems, they thrive. That's like they live to solve problems. That's their DNA. You know anybody like that? It's just like, give them a temple, the more problems, the better. And they just roll up their sleeves. Okay, let's, they love to solve problems, right? And you get, someone with a Brahminical nature is like, oh, this is a big headache. I don't want to deal with this. I just want to read the Bhagavatam and give class. And I don't want to deal with this, right? Different nature. So it's also, it can be relative in that way of what is an obstacle and what isn't, right? I mean, as a fact, give someone who's really active a book, and in 5 minutes, he's asleep. The best sleeping pill you can give him is a book, especially Bhagavatam. That even works faster, isn't it? But you give him 10 problems, he's like up till midnight, and then he's up at Mangalarti and he's on fire. So different nature. So that has to be taken into consideration. There's also the meditation that if there's a problem, then it provides me an opportunity to go through the problem while practicing Krishna consciousness. Because, sometimes things are difficult, so difficult. That's really a test of your Krishna consciousness. Can you tolerate this? Can you go through this without giving up, without being extremely affected by the situation? And I look at a lot of obstacles like that. Like, okay, Krishna, this is just a test now, After all those classes I gave last year every day about how to be tolerant, well, now you've put this in the way, and how I'm always telling devotees, don't focus on the things that disturb you. Well, yesterday I had something to disturb me, and right after I had to deal with it, I had to go chant. So, okay, so now I have to live what I teach, and I actually appreciate it. I don't shy away from it. I see it as an opportunity. Like, well, this is life, and these opportunities make us stronger. They give us a chance to practice. So you can see it like that also. Okay, and you can see it like, well, here's a situation. What am I going to do? How am I going to handle it? What do I know? What have I learned about this? How strong am I? All these things. So that's another way of thinking about it. But again, not to deal with it in a way where you attempt to do something that's beyond your capability, and then it has a bad effect on you. So for example, I was just reading a letter yesterday where Prabhupada said that sometimes you go out to save people, but you're not strong. So instead of converting them, they convert you to be a karmi. So you weren't strong enough to be in that situation. So you have to be realistic, because in your mind, you may understand this is what I should do, but in reality, you may not be able to do it. So you have to do what you can do, right? So that's important. Don't go out and try to save Jagai and Madhai. You might end up in the ICU unit, right? So Prabhupada gave that example. He said, Lord Nityananda could do it. He said, but if you can't do it, don't try. It's not like service to your guru that I'm going to try to do the impossible. You do it when you can do it. So it may not always be an obstacle, but it may be just a reality that I can't deal with this. So I'm not running away from it, thinking losing because I'm not determined or not tolerant. It's just because I'm going to fail and I'm not going to run into it. I'm not going to embrace the tiger right now until I'm Lord Chaitanya. Until I have the power of Lord Chaitanya, I'm not embracing any tigers, at least not soon. Something like that. I was looking at that picture of Lord Chaitanya in the forest. I was looking at yesterday, or maybe it was Friday when we were chanting japa. And it's like, it was just like, did this really happen? Because you can't imagine tigers embracing and kissing and dancing. They're all up on their hind legs dancing. And every time I look at them, I'm like, really? I'm trying to imagine, and there it is. Lord Chaitanya appeared, and that's how they felt, right? And I go, okay, let's go to Africa and try it. We'll take a Harinam party, out in the jungle. Let's try this and see. Am I chanting Shuddha? This is how we'll know. If the tigers eat me, it's not Shuddhanam, so I'll just have to die because I'm not chanting. But if I'm chanting Shuddhanam, then the tigers are going to dance. So this is a good test. Let's take everybody out, We'll just sit you all down, chant japa in the jungle. And, if you live through it, it means Shuddhanam. If not, well, too bad. Tigers got prasadam to eat. If you've been a devotee 7 years, your body's prasadam. So you did food for life for the tigers. So, Hare Krishna. Yeah. So, it's difficult to answer the question. Can you hear the lawnmower in the background? You can't? Oh, it's getting real close. It's like where we're staying, it's like all they do is mow the lawn and cut branches off trees with big loud machines. But we can just hear it as an om, right? There's an om in the background. Oh. Jnanatimidandasya Vinanjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. At least he's mowing in my key. Well, that's good. I think he's mowing in the key of E or something, or E flat. What do you think, Nadia? Something like maybe E flat. And you can test it out. See how good I am at hearing what do they call that? And you can hear the pitch correct, or whatever they call it. Anyway, so the difficulty in answering the question is it will depend on the individual. So it may be an obstacle for you, but not an obstacle for someone else. Someone else may be able to dissolve that obstacle, and for another person, they will be dissolved by the obstacle, right? So that has to be considered. So, and she goes on to say, I guess that's you. I think that Krishna wants to stop me because my decision will definitely affect other people. So I think that Krishna is just trying to take care of these people. Well, there's another thing that may be useful to discuss as part of this question. Some people, by nature or circumstance, or since they become devotees, kind of get in this, like, I can't decide mood. Like I'm unsure, especially when you become a devotee, because you may be sure about things materially, but now you're entering new territory, so you're not always sure. I don't know. I mean, I'm not that advanced. How do I know? But that may be true, and that's why we need to get advice from seniors. But it also may be that you have that nature and it just got worse as a devotee because you know less. So it's even harder to make decisions, which is understandable. But at some point in your Krishna consciousness, you should have enough knowledge where after discussing, thinking, reading, studying, you should be able to make decisions. I have found that I'm not such an indecisive person by nature, but I can't say that I always jump to conclusions also. I like to carefully consider. But one thing that I think is extremely important is always being open when you make a decision that it could be the wrong decision, and not be so black and white, narrow-minded to say, no, it is the right decision, even when down the road you get evidence that it isn't. So you should be open to say, okay, sometimes you have to make a decision, right? You don't, it's 50-50, but you can't just remain frozen. So you have to do something. But go into it with an open mind and say, well, this is what I think should be done, or this seems to be the best decision, but I'll just go in with an open mind and we'll see. We have to look at the results. Because sometimes we can become so proud and we just think this is the right decision. And even though when we don't get the right result, we don't see it, or we ignore it, or we don't admit it. So that's not good. No, it's the right decision. I made the right decision. Yeah, but the results are bad. That's just their fault. So we don't want to be so headstrong like that we can't see that we made the wrong decision. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there is a conversation where Prabhupada's talking about Gurukula, and he uses this word, this phrase, the Gurukul experiment. So Prabhupada, therefore, we can understand, therefore, that Prabhupada didn't really know if it would go over well. So we're trying to see if this works. And in a sense, many of the things Prabhupada did were an experiment on the Western people. Like he knows this works in India with Indian people, but maybe this isn't going to work with Americans or Europeans. So he was testing. So that's what I'm saying. That sometimes that's all you can do is test. And I understand that in making decisions, especially as younger devotees, it can be confusing. So what you may want to do as a younger devotee is when you're trying to make a decision, just always take advice. And after a while, if you're taking advice from mature devotees, you'll understand their thinking process, which will enable you to start making better decisions. How are they analyzing? How are they looking at it? Then you might say, well, I didn't have all the knowledge I needed to make the decision. They did. So their decision seems quite reasonable, logical, based on what they had. So then you realize, okay, I need more knowledge. I need to know more. I need to ask. This is what I'm doing. Do you have any philosophy to the contrary, or any pastime that would indicate this is the wrong decision? So gradually you learn. And as I said, you will know if it's the right decision or the wrong decision by doing it. And of course, if your decision is going to affect other devotees, you want to be more careful about it. If it's just affecting you, or if it's just like a preaching program, let's decide, let's try this. If it fails, it's not the end of the world. At least you know what doesn't work. Try something else. So I would say we have to be extremely careful when we make decisions that can affect other devotees. And we should be very careful, not whimsical. We should make sure those are the right decisions. Right? So now let me say something about becoming a devotee and not being able to make a decision. It's important to understand that after you become a devotee, common sense is still common sense. Although sometimes common sense has to be edified with Krishna conscious understanding, but generally you'll find that common sense applies everywhere, inside of Krishna consciousness and outside, right? There's a shark in the ocean today. I want to go to the beach. Probably don't go swimming there, right? No, Prabhu, I'm a devotee. Krishna will protect me. It's totally my karma. If the shark wants to eat me, he will. If I'm meant to die today, I will. No, we don't go that far. I mean, if you're very transcendental and you actually don't mind getting eaten by a shark, that okay, more power to you. Or you have so much Shakti that when the shark sees you, he's just like, okay, leave you alone. You're a pure devotee. All right. I don't want to discount that. But until that happy day comes when you're on the level of Thakur Haridas and others, probably swimming in the ocean with the shark may not be the best idea, unless you're Krishna Priya. That was her like majors, like sharks. She swims with sharks. That's part of her job. And if they try to get to her, they never bother her because she knows how to think. And if they do, she knows what to do. You just punch them in the nose. They get like all, punch them in the nose without getting eaten. I don't know how you do it. I haven't tried it. Don't plan to try it, but there's a way to deal with it. But anyway, you understand. Don't ever think that common sense doesn't apply. And of course, I understand that there is a level of transcendental common sense also. But a lot of that transcendental common sense, as I said, will depend on your faith. Like Prahlad Maharaj was poisoned by putting poison in his food. And then he offered that to Krishna. He's like, okay, Mahaprasade Govinde. It's like, it's prasadam. So, but Prahlad Maharaj just poison it. No, it's prasadam. Don't worry. But, if someone has COVID and, probably don't want to take their remnants, right? No, it's prasadam. It's transcendental. Yeah. I know it's prasadam and I know it's transcendental. The question is, how transcendental are you? Because it's also, faith. We actually see from the story with Prahlad Maharaj that faith affects matter. It actually does. Isn't that amazing? It affected like that. It affected the quality of the prasadam, or it affected his ability to eat it without getting sick. Yeah, I know that joke, that Mahaprasad joke. So, but when Prabhupada told that story, he said, you can't imitate that, because if you try to imitate, like, I know this devotee has COVID. I know that person who ate that prasadam at the Sunday feast that left the remnants has typhoid fever. This one has this disease and that disease, communicable diseases. But it's prasadam and I see it as prasadam and I take it. Yeah, so we could say if you actually saw it on that level and had that faith, like Prahlad Maharaj, it wouldn't affect you. But until you're on that level, then you have to use common sense. Do you know, ladies and gentlemen, when we were young devotees, what we did after the Sunday feast? Did anyone ever tell you? We ate all the prasadam that the non-devotees left on their plates. Because it's prasadam. Anyway, we're still alive. Well, some of us who did it are no longer alive. I don't know if it's because they ate that prasadam. But that practice, I think, as I remember, Prabhupada was told we were doing that, and he said, don't do it. So you have to act according to your realization. So this is a whole other topic of how faith can affect matter. But the point of this discussion is that don't give up your common sense when you become a devotee. At the same time, you have to have this like transcendental eye that can see. Well, maybe in some cases, there's a transcendental vision which transcends common sense. And I think we tend to err on that side as young devotees. We go like, I'm jumping off the building. If Krishna wants me to live, I will, something like that. So we don't want to go that far. I mean, philosophically, that's true, but from the point of view of common sense, like, well, Prabhu, if you do jump off the building, I guess Krishna doesn't want you to live because you're not going to, something like, just be practical, right? Of course, anything could happen, your suspenders could get caught on a window and you're just hanging there, like in a comedy, movie from 1920 or something. That, of course, that could happen, but we wouldn't depend on it. So we had also talked a little bit, I think in one of the classes about, I don't know if it was this class, about intuition. That sometimes you just have a feeling. I shouldn't walk down that street. I don't know why. I just have a feeling. So many people have stories like that, isn't it? There was some danger somewhere, and it's just, I don't know, I walk this way every day, but this one day I just had a feeling, and I walked on another street and found out that something happened on that street, and they might have been injured or killed if they walked in that street. So, the process of Krishna consciousness is simultaneously, it's a balance of using common sense mixed with my understanding of Krishna, gut feelings mixed with Krishna consciousness. Both obviously have to be there. And the more you become Krishna conscious, the easier it is to deal with both of them. But I don't think it's healthy if all the people who join Krishna consciousness give up their common sense and gut instincts about things. At the same time, we can say you have to elevate your knowledge in Krishna consciousness so that your gut instincts are more in line with our philosophy. Your common sense is more in line with our philosophy, but at the same time, often gut instincts have nothing to do with philosophy. It's just, you just feel something, or I don't feel this is right, isn't it? It's just material, right? Christy, I want you to marry this guy, and you look at him and you're like, that doesn't feel right. I don't trust him. It's like, no, you have to marry him. He's a nice guy. Something's wrong. I can't put words on it. Something feels wrong, And then, you find out 2 years later that he's been in prison for 20 years, for like serial murder and things like that. So that's just something material. So I don't think it's wise to give up material common sense and material gut feeling. But if you are indecisive, you can always ask somebody, this is how I feel. What do you think? Right? Does this make sense? And like I said, it may make sense for you, may not make sense for someone else. So that's, it's not that everything is always the same for all of us. Okay. You know the joke about the tiger? Or tiger was about to eat the devotee, and the devotee said, Krishna, make him a devotee, then he'll be vegetarian. So that's what the devotee was thinking. So the tiger becomes a devotee, and then he chants Sharira Avijita, because now he's a devotee and he's going to eat you anyway, but he's chanting the prayer now instead. Mahaprasadi Govinda. That's the joke. You probably heard it. If you haven't heard it, you've heard it now. I always have a problem. Who said this? Alina said. I always have a problem with faith changes matter. It reminds me of a placebo effect. And then I think it is us and our thought and beliefs that change everything. Well, at least we know, all right. I heard something the other day. This person did an experiment. They said, like, close your eyes. Imagine you're in a forest. You're camping and you get up to go to the bathroom. So you just walk out in the forest, and then you evacuate, do what you have to do, and you walk back, but you lose your direction. You didn't bring any flashlight or anything. And you're walking and you can't find where you were. And then all of a sudden you hear the sound in the bush and you're thinking, oh my God, it's a bear. So she's asking you to visualize this and notice what you're thinking in your body. And so even though you're visualizing it, because because you're visualized, because it's in your mind, and your mind doesn't know what's real and not, your body starts to correspond with fear. And then she says, and your friend walks out from the bushes, because they were also answering the call of nature at the same time, and it's not a bear. He said, notice how your body feels. It just calms down, right? So definitely, we at least can accept or understand that how we see something affects us physiologically. The fears affect us. If we're happy, it affects us. If we're calm, it affects us. If we're stressed, it affects us, right? And a lot of that calmness or stress is based on how we see a situation, and how we see the situation is often based on the filter through which we see it, which is the filter of a belief, right? So just the fact that I believe something doesn't mean it's true, but it definitely has an effect on us on the physical level, right? So that's not placebo per se. I mean, it could be a placebo because it wasn't a bear, but it did have an effect, right? Because I thought it was. So now, I think there's another thing we understand, that if I say, Alina, I want you to distribute 100 Bhagavad Gitas today, and your first thought is, I can't do that. And then I say, you are absolutely right, you can't do it. And you say, why did you ask me if I can't do it? I said, because the only way you can do it is if you believe you can. So I'm agreeing with you that you can't do it because you said you can't. So you're like, okay, you really think I can do 100 Bhagavad Gitas? I said, yeah, might take you 15 hours, but that's only what, 7 Bhagavad, 6 Bhagavad, 6.5 Gitas, 6 to 7 Gitas an hour. That's only one every 10 minutes or 8 minutes. Yeah, okay. He's like, all right, that's possible. So you're starting to, it's like, well, what do I say? And I say, well, just say this. This is what all the book distributors say. And you go, and you listen to it and you go, oh, I think that's a good line. I think, if I approach 10 people in 10 minutes, I'm sure one of them will take the Gita, and it only takes me a minute to say all that. So now you switch, you have this belief, right? So let me ask you a question. You're going to go out and do the exact same thing. I told you, distribute 100 Bhagavad Gitas, and you said, I can't. And I said, well, just go out and do it. And so that's all I said. And you're going to go out thinking, I can't do it. And then we talk, and you're going to go out and think, I can do it. In which situation do you think you're going to distribute the 100 Bhagavad Gitas? Obviously, when you believe you can do it. Now, if you went out and tried, and after a while you started doing it, it may change your beliefs. It's like, oh, actually, I can do this. So you get rid of the fear. But we all have experience that our beliefs create boundaries or no boundaries. And then reality tends to kind of evolve around how we believe. So the point is that how we think is affecting. It's not like some mystical, psychological, phenomenon with all these modern spiritual speakers talking about the quantum field and this and that. It's just a fact which we all have experience of. And anyone who's done book distribution has this experience every day they go out, because if they go out in the wrong consciousness, they say the exact same thing and they don't do well. And if they go out in the right consciousness, it doesn't matter what they say, and everybody takes a book. And we have experience of that there's a mental energy affecting people, isn't it? I mean, I've had that experience. When you're in the fire of book distribution, it actually doesn't matter what you say. You could say nothing. Just give them a book and they're like, so what? You go, well, give a donation. Come on. And they're like, oh, okay. It doesn't matter what you say. It's just your energy affects them. What's a donation for? It's to pay for my Porsche. What do you think? And they're like, okay, that sounds good. They'll just laugh. You can say anything, right? So we all have experience of that our mentality is affecting reality. Now, some ladies have told me that they have this mother instinct, right? And so whenever they have a boyfriend, they become his mother. And they always attract men who need mothers, which are kind of like all the loser men who are like, overcoming a pornography addiction or an alcoholism or, low self-esteem, minus 10 on the scale of self-esteem. They end up attracting guys who need mothers, who are just kind of big losers. And then after a year or two, they're like, I married a loser. And they're like, yeah, of course you married a loser. Because that's how you think, not that you're a loser, but you just thought I need to be a mother to some guy. So then they show up. And studies have shown that, and this is the danger of low self-esteem. If you have low self-esteem, it's very easy to attract people who will abuse you because you're just kind of like, you feel like you deserve to be abused. So, I'm so bad, I'm the worst thing that ever hit the planet, and I'm not worthy of anything. And then, yeah, you'll marry some guy who'll let you know that every day. Isn't that interesting? Have you ever read stories about that, or have you experienced that? So, I could go on for the next 28 hours telling you stories of beliefs that created reality. So we can't deny that what we're thinking is manifesting. Look at Prabhupada manifested, right? Look what Prabhupada manifested. I've seen book distributors manifest amazing things. I've seen preachers manifest amazing things, and things falling into place because they believed, they were enthusiastic, we were visioning it, and vice versa. And unfortunately, the vice versa is quite common, isn't it? So my philosophy is, if it works in a negative way, why wouldn't it work in a positive way, right? Like if I think I can't distribute 100 Bhagavad Gitas and I go out and distribute 3 in 15 hours, well, that worked. That was proof that what you think becomes your reality, because all I did was 3 Bhagavad Gitas, because that's all I could imagine possibly doing, right? You ever experienced that? Any of you distributing books? Like, well, that's all I could do. Well, that's all you did, because that's what you believed, and your beliefs manifested. And then you go to the Sankirtan class, you get inspired, and you start believing, well, actually, I actually could do 20 Bhagavad Gitas today, and you go out and do 19. This is very common experience, right? So we can't deny that, right? So, and specifically about faith in Krishna consciousness, it's essentially important, because you're going to hit a wall if you lack faith. Because for example, we chant the holy name, and we're not seeing Krishna. And sometimes it's like, is he actually there? It's like, I just fell asleep. How could I fall asleep if Krishna's there? Or I got bored. If he's actually there, how could it be boring? And so these doubts can go in our mind. And so as the doubts come, then the holy name becomes less and less Krishna, because the faith is decreasing, because we're doubting, because the experience was not that it was Krishna, right? So we have to amp our faith up and say, no, it is Krishna. I'm just not pure enough to experience it. And as that faith increases, what happens? The experience of Krishna in his name increases. So faith it's essential for your devotional service, right? Prabhupada's faith in the order of Bhaktisiddhanta, that we would be successful. Why are we distributing books? They asked Prabhupada. Because Bhaktisiddhanta said, I don't even know, Prabhupada said, I don't even know the result. Of course, sometimes he told us what would happen by distributing books, that the world would become Krishna conscious. But other times he wanted to make another point, that I don't know the result. It's just Bhaktisiddhanta said, do it, so I'm doing it. That kind of faith. So there are some things that obviously we don't know, and we have to have faith in the words of superiors who say, no, it's like this, and I can't see it like that. No, but it is. You just don't know it, but you have to think that way. And that's how you make progress in spiritual life. Now, from the logical, scientific / atheistic perspective, we're all brainwashed, because we're believing in things you cannot study empirically, right? That's the big like, oh, you religious people are just idiots, because you have no proof. As if they have proof of the Big Bang. I mean, if you want to give the idiot prize, I would give it to them personally. That's just my opinion. They deserve it much more than the religious people, I think. Everything came from the Big Bang. All right, well, where did the Big Bang come from? That's a good question. I never thought of that one. Well, it just came from nowhere, right? Well, where did nowhere come from? So they can't answer these questions, right? So, so faith is, understanding why we should be faithful and how to be faithful is extremely important. It's a foundation of our bhakti, ado shraddha. That's where it begins. And the definition of faith is really, Shastra gives the definition of faith is unflinching trust in something sublime. But if you unpack it, it means unflinching trust in something you can't see at this present point. That requires a lot of faith, right? Alina, I want you to believe there are purple polka dot people on Mars. And you're like, whoa, that's like a lot to believe in. No, I've been there. I've seen them. Okay, you've been there. I trust you. Okay, I believe it. So it's something like that. Bhagavatam is telling us all these like four-headed Brahma. Four heads is nothing. There are other Brahmas in other universes with a lot more heads than that. 10-headed Ravana. It's like, I'm supposed to believe this? And Prabhupada's answer is, what have you seen? Where have you been? Like, you're just on one little planet, like, what do you know? You're just a little young lady in Germany. What do you know? That was Prabhupada's answer. Well, it's hard to believe that, there's a sun god on a chariot. And Prabhupada's like, this little young girl, it was, I think, Australia. She's a young girl in Australia. What do you know? That was his answer. And that's the perfect answer, isn't it? What do you know? It's hard. She said, it's hard to believe. And Prabhupada said, yeah, what do you know? What have you seen? Where have you been? Where I come from is a very, very small town. It's 7,000 people. And, my daughter's been around the world like 86 times, in the first 3 years of her life. So she went to college with all these people who've never, been out of the city in their life, so it's like their perspective of life is quite limited, So, like she'll tell them, I've been in India. Where's that? Yeah, people are starving there, right? So it's like, that's what we're like, It's like Brahmaloka and different Brahmaloka, and what are the bodies made out of? Ether. Ethereal bodies. All right, try to get that one in your head. Bodies made out of ether. Bodies made out of space. That's interesting. Never seen one of those, have you? So you have to start imagining these things, because you have faith. That luckily, I'm just a young lady born in Russia, living in Germany. I don't know everything. I definitely haven't been around the universe to see all these things and hear all these great sages with vision to see these things telling me. So probably I should trust them more than I trust Carl Sagan, or what's the other one? What's the big atheist who hates God? There's a few of them, trust these guys. What's his name? Dawkins, right? Is that his name? Not Charles Darwin, Dawkins guy. Yeah. God is a replacement for your lack of knowledge. Once you get enough knowledge, you don't need him. It's like what they say we have this word when we're like placeholder. Yeah, whenever we work on a book, we have like a title and a cover, which is a placeholder before we actually figure out the actual title and cover. So God is a placeholder for everyone who doesn't have enough knowledge to know that the only reason you had a God is because you couldn't understand the universe scientifically. Now that we understand it scientifically, you don't need the placeholder anymore. That's their idea, right? Sounds good if you want to be God. Yeah, I'll buy that. Then I can become God. At least I don't have to do what God says, because there isn't a God that says anything, and the Bible is just made up, right? So that's pretty convenient. It's pretty convenient, right? Isn't it? Now we're going to have to listen to the voice message as part of class, if they leave one. Oh, okay. So Adho Shraddha, faith is fundamental to bhakti. Oh, she got it. She got it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So there is this thing called the placebo effect that if I convince you there's medicine in this, your mind will cure your body. Okay, that's okay. But we're trying to convince you of things that are actually real. They're not placebos, right? So if it works for a placebo, it certainly is going to work for reality. And that's Prahlad Maharaj. This is prasadam. Nothing can contaminate it. So don't try this at home. Just experiment, Nadia, what are you doing today? I'm buying cyanide. What for? I'm going to try this Prahlad Maharaj experiment and see if it works. It's like Prabhupada used to say, they say cyanide has no taste. And I go, well, but if you put it on your tongue, it'll kill you. So I said, how do they know it has no taste? Because if they tasted it, they would die and they couldn't tell you. So something like that. But the fact of the matter is your beliefs will affect your reality. So if we align our beliefs with Krishna consciousness, that becomes the reality. And of course, we have beliefs about ourselves that limit us, that I can't distribute all these books, or I can't do this or that. And that's also true, that it does affect us because it's just a filter. And I have these limitations, and you may have some limitations, but I think a lot of us don't have all the limitations we think we have. Or perhaps we could break through those limitations, but we don't believe we can. So we need to be aware of these things. Hare Krishna. Okay, well, that was quite a discussion. Now we have more. If we were gods. You've already been a god in another life. Don't worry about it. Would you like to be a demigod? Raise your hand if you'd like to be a demigod. Enjoy. Well, ladies and gentlemen, in another life you already were. So, there's this story of Trivikrama taking 3 steps from Bali Maharaj, Vamana. And Bali Maharaj said, why are you only asking for 3 steps? I can give you more than that. He's like, yeah, but if you're not going to be happy with 3 steps, then you won't be happy with the whole universe. And I've heard so many people say that, just ordinary, maybe they're not ordinary, but they're teachers. And they say the same thing. If you're not happy now with what you have, don't think you'll be happy when you get that $1 million or when you become, the YouTuber of the universe. Your show is being broadcast on Brahmaloka or something. Then you'll be happy. Because the reality is you go through different layers. So when you become a millionaire, then you start looking at the people who make 10 million a year and you feel like I'm a loser. Isn't it? When you become the 1 million followers on YouTube, you start looking at the people with 10 million followers and like, dang, I only have 1 million. So it's like, if you're not happy with 1 follower, why are you going to be happy with 1 million or 10 million? You won't. So I think that's an important lesson, isn't it? Obviously, I'm not happy because I haven't eaten in 6 days. That's different. We're not talking about, basic necessities and necessary emotional things. We're talking about excesses. What do we call that? The needs, normal emotional needs, human needs. We're not talking about that. We're talking about excesses. I have a question about fear. Prabhupada said fear means we misidentify ourselves with the body. Yeah, because what's the biggest fear? Dying. It is also said in the Shastra that fear is a sign of ignorance. But what about life-threatening situations? Should a person also force oneself not to fear and trust that Krishna will solve? You mean not run? It depends on your realization. Like Prabhupada was fearless. If the bombs were coming, Prabhupada would be just like, Prabhupada was asked, when the bombs are dropping, what do you think? He said, I think of the verse of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, Tamayam, and he's coming to take us away. That's how Prabhupada saw it. So yeah, you can't imitate that, but that's how a pure devotee sees it. So you have to act according to your realization. But if you don't have that realization, at least that's the realization you should have, that you should work towards, right? All right. I'm walking across the street. I'm walking across the freeway. It's another test. So let me see if I'm fearless. No, we don't do those things. I'm fearless. I'm going blindfolded across the freeway. The cars will stop. They probably will, but that's not what Prabhupada asked us to do. Our fearlessness will be more like faith in what Krishna says, that I will protect you from sins, surrender to me, but not giving up common sense. I think that's important, right? Act according to your own level and your own realization. That is there. And then as you become more advanced, you will become more fearless, and then you can act according to that realization. Of course, sometimes we push ourselves and we don't have the realization, but we know this is the right way to act. So even though we're fearful, we think there's no reason to be fearful. Krishna's protecting me, and then that calms us down. So you'll have to judge. Again, these questions are subjective according to the individual. What's the difference between your beliefs, faith, and your karma? If you say that what I believe and have faith in what it is I get, then where's place my karma? Well, they work together because there are five things that affect what happens, right? You read that in Bhagavad Gita, the 5 factors of action. So one of them is karma. There's 4 other factors. The other thing is karma is action and reaction. So when we talk about karma, this is my karma. You're talking about the karma at birth. And so now you're 30 odd years old, or however old you are. And so you've created 30 years of karma, right? So that gets mixed in. And at every moment, you're creating karma in terms of what you're doing, what you're thinking. So we can't think that there's no reaction to what I think, even though on the karmic level of sin, it's called yuga, we don't get it. But on the level of reaction to how I think, as we just discussed, if there's fear, if there's anxiety, it stresses my body out. So you could say that's a karmic reaction also. And might say on my chart, it said, I would always be fearful. That's like I'm born under this star. But the fact that I'm fearful is now giving me cancer or giving me some stomach trouble or something. So there's reactions like that. So they work on all levels. And so that if you think a certain way, it produces a certain result. So that's also a karmic reaction, right? Like I like to joke with people and say, well, you want to understand how karma works? Just go and punch people in the face. See what kind of karma you get for that. You'll be very soon in the hospital, I can guarantee, especially if you punch big, strong guys, right? And punch them hard, yeah. They'll punch back. So that'll be your karma, and say, well, where in my chart did it say that I was going to get punched on June 21st? Well, it didn't exactly say that, but it showed in your chart that you have a tendency to do foolish things, and that was something foolish, and now you got a reaction. So you have to see it all as a combination. Does that make sense? Is that okay? Pamela Dave says 3 steps of land is enough. If I'm not happy with that, I won't be happy with more. But he took the entire universe. So how does this work? Well, first it was taken as 3. It was Bali who said, come on. Why don't you put the 3rd step on my head? Give me a break. We can do this play in New York, Have a little, come on, Bali, put your foot on my head. Come on, give me a break. But he was showing his godliness. So he was doing both. He was showing, I'm God. I can put my foot on throughout the universe. Why not? How does that work as an instruction? The instruction is, I'm God. I can cover the universe. That's the instruction. And every time Krishna does something, the other instruction is, you're not God, in case you didn't notice. Because you can't do that. You can't take your foot and put it throughout the universe and knock into the Garbhodak ocean. You can't do that, which means you're not God and he is. But he was teaching the example of a Brahman, take 3 steps of the land. That's what he asked for. And then he was teaching the example that I'm God. So I'll take my 3rd step, like, you're useless, Well, he wanted to chastise Bali. So look at, 3 steps, just, there's nowhere left to step. You cheated me. That was his Leela, but it was still 3 steps. Just, anyway. He had to teach he was God. So sometimes there's a contradiction, right? Okay. So it looks like the party's over. Kormani has come. So, well, you're already here. You're already here in the party, so you don't have to go anywhere. That's quite convenient, right? Isn't it? All I have to do is sit there, and I have to sit and think, what am I going to say to inspire you to chant japa? I just answered 15 questions this morning, more than that. Maybe 18 questions about japa from the retreat that we had. So maybe I'll tell you something. So how are we going to do this? Because Kormani, this is already being broadcast as a class. So
stop recording or stop the stream, and then we'll start live again.
okay.
Could you make me host? Hare Krishna Guru.
Hare Krishna, dear Garmani, I'm the host, so I will stop the broadcasting.
Can't you just make her the host? She'll stop. So you'll stop oh yeah, you can do it. You'll stop broadcasting on Facebook.